Hello there, my beautiful book lovers. My name is Kimia, and welcome back to my book nook. So once again, it's May, and that means that we're going to do a video recommending books by a Latin American author. Although the past 2 years, I believe two, I have been doing videos that were really focusing on books by Mexican author, because I usually used to do this video during Cinco de Mayo, and so I wanted to kind of go back to that to recommend books by Mexican author. But this year, because first of all, I'm a lot late, and also I didn't have a chance to read that many books by Mexican author, I thought that I'm going to broaden it up a bit and focus on books that are by Latin American author. So before we start, I would actually love if you guys would leave any books or even sometimes shows or movies that you have seen, read by Latin Americans that really has taught you something, touched your heart, or was just so profound, because I'm always looking to read books from different cultures around the world, really, to learn from their stories. And so I would love to learn about other authors or books that I have not really paid attention to or known about. So anyway, it would be great if you guys do that first, but then let's get into the list. So to start, we're going to actually start with one of my new all-time favorites. This one is actually a bit older, but it's one of those like very classic books that it's not only about the Mexican, and really it's about Chicana's woman actually, but it's also about feminism, racism, classism. It has a lot of different elements, and that book is Borderlines by Gloria Anzaldúa. And before we start this video, I mean, we technically sort of started, but please forgive me for all of these pronunciation and butchering them, but we have the book, so this is the book. And this book, it's actually a collection of essays and poems that really focus on the experience of Chicana's women who live in this borderland that it's between US and Mexico. And it's really focusing on the lives of these people that are living in these sort of situation that they are in between two cultures, and it's really focusing on the struggles that they are facing. And the book, it's mostly focusing on women, and especially because Gloria herself, she's a queer woman, she's also focusing on the experiences of the queer community in this situation. And the reason that I love this book, it's, first of all, again, it's a classic. It's really one of those books that really pushed and started this movement to better understand how the struggle of women, queer community can be different when it comes to people of the color, because it's sort of like, you know, it's a double situation, and this book really plays it so beautifully. It's a non-fiction book, obviously, but it's telling the story of all of these women in this community. The first part is all of these essays that it's really representing the struggles of everyday life for this community at this border. And then the second part of the book is actually poetry, and I love that so much because it's such a beautiful balance between a topic that it's so hard and it's so harsh, and it's a reality for such a big community, and it's starting it in a very much more serious way, even though the essays are still beautifully written, but then when it moves to the poetry, it gives it a different color, and it gives it that sense of hope, that sense of how we can change for better, how we can sort of like use these differences to actually improve everybody and all of us, instead of trying to fight one another over those differences. And so it's a fantastic book. Honestly, I highly recommend it, because it's, again, one of those stories that you cannot really learn about them unless you live it through the people who are experiencing it. And so because of that, it's a fantastic book. If you get a chance, I highly recommend to give it a go. And again, I'm not a person that actually enjoys poetry that much. I like, not that I don't like poetry, but it's not one of those genres that I go to most of the time. But with this book, it was just, you know, it was so different, and so I highly recommend it. Then we have Bad Girls by Camila Wilada, if I'm not wrong. And this book, it's actually a semi-biography sort of a story. She is an Argentinian trans woman, and in this book, which it's the story of Camila, that it's a trans woman that is in, I believe it's in Cordoba in Argentina, and there's this community of trans women, and there are actually also sex workers, and the story is really revolving about this group that how they're dealing with this hardship that they're facing as not only sex workers but also as trans women, and especially like in Cordoba, that there's all of these sort of hostility towards them, again because of both their gender and also their field of work. And so the story is following this group. Mostly it's Camila's stories, but it's also following all the rest of the girls, the bad girls. And they are sort of all coming from like different places, different experiences, different families, you know, obviously, and we are following them. And the beauty of this book is that even though it's semi-biography, it has this magic realism that it's one of my favorite. It's one of those things that, like, you know, it's one of the main reason that I read a lot of books by Latin American authors, because they do it just so well. And so this book has that it has that element of magic in it that makes this whole experience feel so different, but still so realistic. It's magic realism, and so it's such a touching story. It's so beautiful to see, because in general, trans women truly, it's one of the smallest minorities group that see so much hostility towards them the most all over the world. And it was very interesting to see their experiences in a different culture, that they have also different beliefs based on their culture, their religion, and everything related to that. And so it's a beautiful story. I really enjoyed it, and you know, it's one of those stories that you cannot really experience it unless you're living through it. And it was one of those books that sort of stayed with me after I read it for a while. I mean, it's one of those stories that obviously, like, anytime that you think of it, you know, it brings so many different points to your view of the world. But the first like couple of days, it's really like makes you think, makes you to really question your own life and what you can do and what you do, and sometimes to be grateful for the life that you have, and, like, you know, to realize your privileges, that, you know, sometimes it's even smaller things that truly still count as a privilege and as a blessing. And so that was the reason I really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend that if you're looking for sort of a different stories. And again, I love that how it played with, again, it's based on a true story, but still, because bringing that elements of magic realism, it made it so much more interesting and so different. So if you're interested in that, I highly recommend to give this book a go. Then we have My Broken Language by Kiera Hudas, I believe. And this book, it's actually about a young girl who, in its autobiography, that it's the true story of a girl that is a Puerto Rican girl, Kira, that is living in Philadelphia. And the story, it's really about her and the broken language. It's really interesting to see this element. She is a person that, because of her growing up with her mom and also all of these other female figures around her, aunts and cousins and like neighbors and like grandmothers and everybody around her, that they are all such a strong Puerto Rican woman, and they speak Spanish, and like, you know, they have their culture, and they're really trying to keep that culture and practice it as much as they can in their everyday life. And then at the same time, she is this child that growing up in a country that it speaks English and has a different culture, and she's trying to also learn that and become part of that, so like to kind of create that balance. And because of that, she feels that she has, like, her language is broken. There are elements that she cannot express it in either English or even in Spanish, and she's trying to find a way to sort of like fix this issue or kind of come over it. And by the time that as she's growing up and as she's learning more from all of these women and people around her through their stories and their experiences and their history, she sort of start to learn and realize that language is such a bridge instead of a barrier, and it can actually bring so many people closer to one another through stories, through all of these poems, essay, anything. And so I love that. I loved it because as a person who also speaks a different language, and there are always those moments that sometimes I'm pretty sure anybody who is bilingual can relate to this feeling that sometimes you will forget the word for something in both languages, and you know that, but it's still, you're like, oh my god, what was it? And you cannot remember either one of them, and it's so frustrating. And there are those moments that you're trying to express something in one language and you just cannot find the right word to describe it or just say it. And so I was relating to this story so much because I could kind of like see it as part of like being my story. And that was the reason I enjoyed it, because like that's the beauty of language, for any language that you speak, that, you know, like does not matter even if two people cannot really talk to one another using one language, there's always sign language, there's always pointing at things sort of language, that again, that's the reason that it's such a bridge and it does not need to be a barrier. And so if you are interested in such a story, or if you have experienced such a story but want to see it in a different point of view of another person, I highly recommend to give this book a go, because I really enjoyed it. It was really interesting to see that how she sort of grew up and learned and was able to improve, but also make it as a like strength instead of a weakness of the things that she was struggling when she was younger and was not really sure how to deal with these two different cultures. And so it's a fantastic book. I highly recommend it. And honestly, it's one of those stories that it's so touching and just lovely to learn about. So anyway, great book. Moving on, we have a book by one of my new all-time favorites authors, and that is The Wind Knows My Name by Isabel Allende. And she is fantastic. I have recommended Violetta before in a different video, and that book, it's fantastic. 100% read it. But this book, it's as great. This book, it's actually the story of, we have two sort of stories. We have first story of Samuel, and he is a Jewish boy that is being sent to England during World War II because, you know, like they like he and his family were living in Vienna. And so because of, to save his life, they were sending him to London to be in England. And then he sort of moves there and he's living there, and we're following his story of how that impacts him and how much it changes him and how much it really like has this trauma on this young kid that it's separated from his family. And then the other story, it actually happens in 2019, and we're following a young blind girl, Anita, that she is running away from El Salvador and everything that's happening in that country with her mother. And when they reach the borders in the US, they are actually separated, and like they're sort of like attacked, and they take her to the immigration facilities or centers. And so she is trying to figure out what to do, what is happening to her, and everything that the story of her. And the reason that I love this story, first of all, I have to say this story, like Isabella's writing, it's so poetic, honest to God. Like, it's one of those books that, like, her writing in general, both of the books that I have read, it's so beautifully and vividly described that you can really feel that how all of these characters are feeling and how they're going through all of these like huge amount of just trauma and emotions and everything. And I love that. I love stories that really makes me to think, to make me to just feel all the feelings and make me to be angry, to be sad, to be happy. And so this is one of the reasons I loved this book, because it was very interesting to see that how even though these two kids, they're separated by continent, by decades, and by the sort of circumstances that they are fighting, sort of like two different wars during World War II, and also the turmoil that was happening in El Salvador. And so despite all of that, their experiences are so similar. They are, at the end of the day, these two young kids that have been separated from their family, from the people that they know, from the culture and the country and language that they know, and are sent because of all of these political sort of rules and regulation to these facilities or a different family and country to be kept, and how much it's affecting them and how much it affects them. And we see with Samuel, because like his story, it's sort of like the longest that we're following, that how some of these traumas and things that you go through at that young age, you cannot ever truly heal from them. And despite the fact that like he's actually able to make a good living. I will not say too much about his life because I don't want to give it away, but like he is making a good living for himself, but still there are those moments, there are those things that will never ever truly be healed. And so it's a beautiful book. Honestly, it's one of those that made me to really think about how we always sort of think and feel that we have changed, that we have sort of for better or for worse move forward, but then you look and you see that we're still the same people. Like, it doesn't matter how many years, decades, and like centuries will pass, sometimes we still keep doing the same thing, the same wrong thing. And so it's a fantastic book. I highly recommend it, especially with the events that are happening at the moment, especially in the US again. It's one of those stories that I feel that it should be really brought up and really talked about and really pay attention to. And so if you're interested in the topic, or if you don't know enough about the topic, but also you don't want to read news or a nonfiction book because, like, you know, maybe that's not your cup of tea, which I understand, that this is the book for it. Because, like, you know, again, like fiction, that's the reason I love it. That sure, it's fiction, but at the end of the day, it's based on true stories, you know, like the characters are not real, but the stories are. And so I highly recommend to give this book a go, because it's fantastic and it's just it's wonderful, it's beautiful. I love it so much. And so yeah, it's a great book. To finish this list, we have Our Migrant Soul by Hector Tobar, if I'm not wrong. And this book, this is actually another sort of non-fiction essay sort of a book. This one, it's really about the term and sort of this definition of Latino. And he is trying to see that how a big group of people have been sort of pushed together to create this like one word to describe them, despite the fact that they are so different in like culture, language, and practices. And he's telling these stories from so many different people that are considered Latino, and he's really trying to see there are different struggles, there are different lives, there are different truly like lifestyles, even like, because like, you know, they come from different classes, technically they come from different backgrounds, and they're working in different fields and like, you know, doing different stuff. And he is similar to My Broken Language, that like we sort of like were talking about how the language, I'm sorry honey, I feel like I'm touching her too much. That we were talking about how language does not really need to be a barrier, and it could be such a bridge. This is the same thing, that like he is trying to point out that even if we're all put to this like one group that is trying to describe a very vast majority of people who have different everything, that does not need to be in a bad way, and we can sort of like add on to it and make it better, and to sort of again add and use those differences to bring us together to create something even better, something even bigger. And so I love this book too, because again, this one, because it's a collection of essay, I felt that it was sort of like a book of short stories, because we are looking at all of these people that are living the different lives, and it's so beautiful too, because like we're comparing, we're sort of like going through all of these again, like the like we're looking at issues with like sexism, classism, racism, and how like sometimes even for the Latino community, that when it comes to even like racism, it's such a different way, because they are not Black enough, and they're also not white, and so there is that always the sort of the struggle that not that they do not face racism, but it's sort of like a different flavor, if we can say. And so anyway, it's a beautiful book to really get a deeper look into all of these issues. And again, I love it because it's not only pointing out the issues, but also pointing out solutions, or suggest solutions and ideas of what we can do better, or what we can do to sort of ease those hardship for the group that we're not part of. And so I loved it. It was a fantastic book. I highly recommend it. Another sort of a non-fiction book that I consider it pretty close to fiction because we're following all of these like different stories. So if you're looking for a book of that sort of genre, I highly recommend this book. And by that being said, this was a pretty quick list for books by, I wanted to sort of like this time again include more stories. And again, don't forget to let me know some of the books that you have read that you very much so loved. And even honestly, like, because I love to read books and stories from different cultures, it does not even need to be books by the Latin American countries and authors. Even if you're from somewhere in Asia or in Europe, or like in like Canada. I mean, US is also too, but like, because I read a lot of books by the US author, I sort of feel like I want to read from other parts of the world. Recommend them and let me know. I would love to read. And by that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. Until the next one, happy reading.